All right, we are back here on the podcast, getting ready for the NBA offseason. Always a fun time in the NBA sphere. Joining me today, the host of the NBA pod, Bryan Toporek, is here. Bryan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I have to say, I've had not always been the biggest NBA guy, but this year sort of got me back into it. It's been a fun year for the association.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of the most wide open title races we've had in some time. So it's good to have some new blood in the finals, and kudos to Giannis and the Bucks for what they did.
Yeah, I have to say, when the finals started, I was not sure what to get expecting out of Giannis, especially because coming off the injury, but he put up some all-time performance, especially that Game 6 clincher.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, and I've been standing for Chris Middleton for years now, so it was great to see him come up big a couple times. Drew Holiday as well, getting his flowers. I do hate the narrative that emerged from the finals about like Chris Paul choking and this is another stain on his legacy. It's like, no, both teams played really well. It's just the Bucks played a little bit better. But I'm not down on the Suns or Chris Paul in particular. No one expected them to get to the finals or be up 2-0 at any point. So yeah, they blew that lead, but kudos to them for getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw Drew Holiday go to the Olympics, basically be the only guy on Team USA to actually really show up in the first game. So he shows you how bad he was.
Yeah, exactly. Right off the plane, too. Unreal.
It is unreal. And we're talking the Olympic team. I have discussions on them for another day, but they're looking forward to right now, the NBA. The offseason is always a lot of fun. I think for me, I want to start with the draft is coming up on Thursday here. So what are some headlines you're looking for in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start right at the top. Does Detroit surprise us and, either not take Cade at number one, or do they trade out of the pick? I know Houston's made some calls about it. Sounds like Toronto might be trying to move up either for Cade or Mobley. OKC, there have been multiple reports now that they offered Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at number 6 for number one, and Detroit turned it down. So conventional wisdom says Detroit will stand pat, take Cade Cunningham with the number one pick. And then, Houston will probably go Jalen Green at 2. Cleveland probably goes Evan Mobley at 3. Sounds like there's some intrigue. Reading Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman yesterday, Jalen Suggs has been presumed to be a lock in the top 4 for most of the season now. But it doesn't sound like rival executives are sold that Toronto's going to go that way. They've heard Scotty Barnes' name pop up. So I think there's more intrigue at the top than usual this year. Like it could go chalk, and maybe this is all just pre-draft smoke screens like usual. But there's a lot of these top 3-4 guys that we're talking about. All the draft experts who I've spoken with said in a normal year, all of these guys would have gone number one. Like they all have franchise centerpiece potential. So seeing how that top of the board shakes out will be fascinating, and it'll kind of dictate how the rest of the draft goes. And then we already saw it yesterday with New Orleans and Memphis pulling off a trade. It sounds like there are a lot of trade conversations, more than usual at this time of year. So I'm curious, what teams are trying to move up. There are multiple teams. Orlando has 5 and 8. The Warriors have 7 and 14. The Knicks have 19 and 21. Do any of these teams try to combine their picks? I think Houston has 23 and 24 as well. And then, teams later in the first round, do any of them try to get off of their pick either for win now help? It sounds like the Sixers at 28 are thinking about that. The Jazz at 30, I've seen, might use that pick to get off of Derek Favors' salary. So Godspeed to anyone doing mock drafts in the next couple of days, because it sounds like the board is going to be completely different by the time the first round wraps up on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all the trade possibilities. This is the first draft in a while. Remember that so many teams have more than one pick. You mentioned Orlando, Oklahoma City, the Knicks, Golden State. I mean, I feel like at least one of those teams can make a big move in the draft with those picks. Golden State's the one I'm watching up because they have 7, 14, and James Wiseman. I don't think they want to wait around for picks to develop and stuff. This title window is Steph Curry.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Golden State could have found that player already, they would have already pulled the trigger. It sounds like, the rest of the league has been somewhat lukewarm on the Wiggins Wiseman 7-14 for a star package. I know they want to get into the Bradley Beal bidding if he requests a trade this week. I don't think that's going to be enough for him. Pascal Siakam, I know John Hollinger of The Athletic, I think he was the first one to report that he's a name to keep an eye on, especially if the Raptors are really in on Scotty Barnes or if they're eyeing Ben Simmons as well, that doesn't seem to bode well for Pascal Siakam's long-term future in Toronto. So there are a lot of wild cards to monitor. And then, we have the Simmons situation hanging over us. We know he's available. It sounds like Beal is at least considering moving on from Washington, which would be a drastic sea change from where he's been throughout his career. He's always been one of those guys who says, I want to stay in Washington, I want to stay loyal, but I want to win. And I think he's looking at the landscape and realizing it's probably not going to happen in Washington. So he might ask out this week. I don't think we get a Damian Lillard trade this week. I just think for a guy of that caliber, I don't want to say he has to force their hand, because I think if Portland was smart, they would be quietly shopping him behind the scenes right now. I think the writing's on the wall there. And I think, given their contract situation, a lot of their guys are heading into the last year of their respective deals. So this would actually be the right time to trade him. This is like the natural pivot point. If you wait until next offseason when Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, Derek Jones Jr. didn't pan out very well for them, but he's also coming off their books, then you might lose Dame and have all these guys. You could have gotten something for these guys this summer, but now they expire and you get nothing for them. So I think Portland should be looking at, okay, what's our long-term 5-year plan here? But I don't necessarily think it happens before the draft.
Yeah, I want to go to Lillard for a minute, because Lillard's obviously a guy who's going to hang over the entire offseason because he's the biggest star on the board who's hinted he might be open to a move. And right now, Portland said, we're not interested right now. But do you think, obviously, before the draft seems tight, considering he's at the Olympics and might not have as many direct contacts with Portland as he usually would, but, do you think it's something that could happen, next week in the offseason? You think he's still in Portland at the start of the regular season?
I think it's likely that he is, but I don't think he should be. I think if Portland was really looking at this objectively, they would realize the best thing for them is to hit reset now, trade him for that star package, whatever it is, and then, again, sell off Covington, Nurkic, explore CJ McCollum trades, hit the hard reset here. Because now I think Portland and Washington are also in somewhat of a staring contest. If Beal asks out from Washington, or if Lillard asks out for Portland, or both of them do, the same teams are going to be bidding for both guys. So whichever one goes off the market first, that's going to be one fewer blockbuster package for the other to decide between. So if either team is really interested in, say, Ben Simmons as the main centerpiece in, one of these star trades, which I don't think they should be, but, let's say they are, they might have to act quickly, because Lord knows the Sixers are trying to find a new home for Ben Simmons as quickly as they can.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously he's going to be one of the big things to watch, because the free agent market, there are some names on it. There are not as many big ones as usual. Who are the guys you're watching in terms of free agency that you think could make some impacts when they move?
Yeah, Kawhi Leonard, we have to start at the top there. I know he's coming off the ACL injury. We don't know what his status is for next season. He's going to miss some time. He might miss the whole season. We don't know. There haven't been any reports saying Kawhi Leonard is seriously considering signing anywhere but the Clippers, but it's at least worth monitoring, because if he does entertain offers elsewhere, with Dallas or Miami, New Orleans just opened up a lot of cap space, that would be, he's the biggest free agent on the board, even if he isn't necessarily seen as widely attainable. Chris Paul, if he declines this $44.2 million player option, again, I don't think he's going to leave Phoenix. I don't see why he would, coming off of this finals run. But if they decide, we don't want to give him, I think Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report's the one who reported he was looking for something in a 3 years, $100 million deal, which is a lot of money for a guy his age and with his injury history. So if Phoenix decides, we can't go up to that point, we'll give you 3 years, $50 million. And the Knicks come out and say, we'll give you 3 years, 120. We don't care. Blank check. That's at least interesting, because I think, especially seeing the impact that Chris Paul had for the Suns this past year, teams are going to be eyeing him as, can he do the same thing for us? Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley, I think, are the two biggest unrestricted free agent point guards on the market. Sounds like Lowry, no one expects him to return to Toronto at this point. So where he ends up is going to be fascinating. I think New Orleans, Miami are probably the most likely destinations. Philly, possible, but there are a lot of complications with regard to sign-in trades. So I think, Ben Simmons or Tobias Harris would have to be going out if Lowry's coming in. And then the restricted free agents are they're like the unsung heroes of this free agent class because, most of the big name free agents are over the age of 30, Lowry, Conley, DeMar DeRozan, those types of guys. Some of the restricted free agents, Lonzo Ball, John Collins, Jared Allen. I don't know why Gary Trent Jr. isn't getting more buzz, but I'm worried that Toronto's just going to be able to steal him for a lot less than he should be getting. So I'm curious to see where those younger guys end up, because those are the guys that you want to invest in long term, that you feel comfortable giving a 4-year big money deal to, rather than a Kyle Lowry who's 35 and he's reportedly asking for $30 million a year. I feel more confident giving a John Collins or a Lonzo Ball that kind of money than I would Kyle Lowry at this stage of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go to the locals here for a minute. I'm New York based, and obviously if the Knicks are the big movers and shakers of the offseason, they have so many things they can do. I want to start in the draft with them at 19 and 21. Do you think they stay put there, or do you think they try and pack those picks and move up? Because I've heard there's rumors of trying to get into the mid to late lottery, looking for somebody up there.
Yeah, so I had Matt Babcock of Basketball News on our podcast the other day. He's heard the same thing, that they're considering moving up. He identified Chris Duarte from Oregon as a possible target for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to move up. Which team can they get to bite is the question. I think there are teams, in that probably late lottery, mid first round range where it makes sense for them to trade down and take 2 bites at the apple instead of 1. But I also think you kind of just have to see how the board plays out if you're in New York. Like if you get to the 13th or 14th pick and you still have, 8 guys on your board who you feel pretty comfortable and confident in becoming NBA players, I'd probably just stay put at 19 and 21 and just, try to get 2 of these young guys in, because odds are, especially in that range, both of them aren't necessarily going to pan out. So, you have to be pretty confident in the guy that you're trading up for. Like, this guy is definitely going to hit, because, again, the hit rate once you get outside of the top 10 is not exemplary, as the Knicks have learned over the years.
Yeah, I feel like with them, if you're staying put, I feel like you're looking for kind of role players who can fill needs for you. I feel like the 3 guys I would look for if I'm down there is either Chris Duarte, like you mentioned, because he's the most NBA ready guy in that range. Isaiah Jackson, give yourself another mobile big, and the big swing would be if Jalen Johnson falls down there, you could take a chance on his talent. What do you think about those kind of guys, the Knicks?
Yeah, no, I think that those are the exact right type of guys to be targeting. I think a Sharif Cooper could make sense there as well. I think they're going to want to find a point guard, whether it's in free agency or the draft. I think that has been a big issue for them over the years, and we'll see if they re-sign Derrick Rose. But I don't think you can go into next season trusting Elfrid Payton as your starting point guard. So, Jared Butler could be interesting for them as well. He's got some medical concerns. He got red flags at the combine, but the NBA has since cleared him, and he's also more NBA ready as well. So if, the Knicks want to build on this positive momentum they generated this past season, maybe they do go after some of these, older, more NBA ready guys rather than a project.
Yeah, I know also they have a lot of cap space in free agency, because the thing with them, I know it doesn't seem like Julius Randle's going to sign long term because it makes sense for him to, but they have to spend this money somehow. And do you think it's more pillow deals, trying to bring the gang back together? Do you think they could try and upgrade? Because if I'm a Knicks fan, I would say this team kind of needs to upgrade, because we saw that what we saw last year with them sort of maybe the height of the ceiling with this group.
Yeah. Oh, I think they're absolutely looking to upgrade. Again, I think point guard is probably the main spot, so I would not be surprised to see them in on, CP3 if he's actually obtainable. Kyle Lowry, I think they'll throw a pretty big offer at him. I think Lonzo Ball has been a rumored target for them for a while. Spencer Dinwiddie could be another interesting one coming off the ACL tear. Dennis Schroeder is the one guy in that group who I would not be especially high on. He turned down a 4-year, $84 million extension from the Lakers this past season, which would imply that he's expecting more money than that. And I would not be super keen on giving him, 490 for 100. So he's the one guy in that range that I would stay away from. But otherwise, the good thing about this class for the free agent class for the Knicks is that not a ton of teams have 20, 30, 40 million in cap space, but the Knicks are one of the few that do. And there are a lot of free agent point guards on the market. So even if they miss on CP3, if they miss on Lowry, if they miss on Conley, the teams that get those guys are probably going to be wiped out. That's going to gobble up all their cap space. So there's probably going to be someone in this like point guard musical chairs who is left without a home. And maybe the Knicks end up getting a discount on the player who, thought he was going to get a big money deal, and all of a sudden his market dries up.
Yeah, I feel like with them, the key to their offseason, I think like you want to improve, but you also want to try and keep the powder dry for future years. I think you want to try and do the net plan where you're good, you're ascending, then the star comes out and says, oh, I can go to New York, put them over the top. Not I have to go to New York, bring 3 friends, and fix the whole thing myself. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think you're spot on about Julius Randle too. You got to keep an eye on his potential extension as well. He's after this year, so the NBA team building is just so tricky because it's like as soon as you feel like you're in a good place, you have 3 other holes that you need to plug. But for the Knicks, I think they're in a good spot for now. How they manage. I think I could see them, especially coming off of the success they had this year. They want to keep that momentum moving forward. Maybe they do decide, all right, now is the time we go all in. We can take advantage of this down market and of these players who aren't going to get the money they expect. And maybe they see what a team like Atlanta did, who spent big last offseason on guys like Danilo Gallinari, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and then rode that to an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. So I could see the Knicks saying that's the play for us, so we can just keep building. But at the same time, as you mentioned, the Knicks are always one of those teams where it's like if they have their eyes on the superstar free agent prizes. And I think now with the success that they've had, they might be more appealing to those types of players than they have been over the past 5 years. Like it's always been a pipe dream for them to end up getting a Kevin Durant or a Kyrie Irving. They didn't have the core around those guys where it would make sense. Now you can at least start to see the foundation of that being built, especially with Julius Randle and RJ Barrett.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to wrap up with the Nets because obviously I didn't want to spend too much time on them because their roster is pretty much set. When whoever they pick in the first round is probably not going to be a major contributor for them. But like, what type of free agencies you got to make besides obviously the Jeff Green, Blake Griffin decision? What else do you kind of see them doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the 2 big questions for them. Can they keep those guys? What kind of contracts do they want? Because, obviously the Nets are way over the luxury tax right now. So they are only going to have the taxpayer mid-level exception at their disposal. It's about $5.9 million. Do they have to dip into that to re-sign Jeff and Blake, or will those guys take, minimum contracts or like slightly above minimum? They can offer 120% of what they earned last year. For Blake, he's still getting almost $30 million from the Pistons next year. So I don't think money should be too much of an obstacle for him. And I would assume the role that he can play for this Nets team, I can be the starting de facto center in the playoffs. I don't think anywhere else he goes, they're going to have that same type of role for him. So that might appeal. And I think they are going to have, the ability to keep Blake probably at the minimum. Jeff Green, I think he's going to have a market. So I think they might have to tap into the mid-level to keep him. Cause I think teams are going to see, he's just kind of a plug and play. You can this is the ultimate glue guy. He was always miscast because of where he got drafted. He was number 5 and people thought he was a star. He's not that type of player. He's just always been like this complimentary role player type, but he's really found his groove in that role. So I think he will be tough to retain at a minimum. And then Spencer Dinwiddie too. I don't think they're going to re-sign him, but do they explore a sign and trade for him? Can they find a team that doesn't have cap space or doesn't have enough cap space and still wants Dinwiddie? And if so, what are they getting in return? Because, any salary they're adding to their books at this point the luxury tax bill is going to swell very quickly for them. So I guess the biggest question for them is how much is their team owner willing to spend on this roster? The hope is you have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. This is the time that you should be willing to go $100 million into the tax. But that's the type of tax bill we're talking about here. It's not, they're $5 million over the line. It'll cost them like $12 million or whatever in tax. They're already at $20 million over. So we're talking a tax bill already before free agency starts in the $40 to $50 million range. And once you get that high, every dollar you add, it's like $3 or $4 in tax. So how they manage, how much they're willing to spend on this roster and what types of guys they can get to fill out. Like, they have the best big three in the league, but as we saw throughout the playoffs, you can have a lot, Milwaukee had a great big three as well, but guys like Brent Forbes, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis played important roles on their championship run. So the Nets can't just rest on their laurels and say we have the best big three in the league, where it's like, well, if your depth is terrible, you're still probably not going to win the title next year, especially if one of these big three get hurt.
Yeah, I feel like with them, I think their whole key is like they're going to sort of be in that where compete with the Lakers. And he's going to have like the ring chasing veterans to get in the depth and finding young guys at value. I think that's their that's not something that takes place just over the offseason. It's something that carries the regular season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they will be in position for those ring chasing veterans. So they will be able to add those guys in minimum deals, even if Blake and Jeff leave. But finding the right guys that's part of the equation. And then I guess the last thing is DeAndre Jordan. Do they really want? I know he's buddies with KD and Kyrie, and he was like part of the package deal, but he didn't play very much in the playoffs or at all in the playoffs, I think. So do they really want his $10 million salary on their books this year? Do they use one of their young guys or their pick? Do they try to use that to get off of his salary?
Yeah, this is a thing to watch for sure, Brian. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow on social media to keep up with the NBA pod?
Yeah, you can find us anywhere podcasts are found. We're at the NBA pod on Twitter, so please subscribe, download. We've got a lot of great stuff coming out over the especially next 2 weeks. We got the draft on Thursday, free agency right after that, and we'll go right into offseason mode. We'll have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, the NBA, the league that never sleeps. Brian, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.